need to learn how to edit. Okay. I've attempted to record this like 4 times. Okay. We're just gonna go with it. We're gonna go with it. All right. Nazism. Adolf Hitler. Okay. Start from the beginning. The core defining idea of Adolf Hitler is struggle. That is the core of his belief, is struggle. The struggle between races, the struggles between classes, the struggles of human beings interacting within each other, and unifying that within a given state. Hitler, as far as I would believe, he thinks that he is the state. He believes he is the epitome of the Aryan race in order to promote the Aryan race for the German people, to solidify them as the greatest group, right? They are the ones that will carry us, carry the world into sort of utopian vision, maybe a heaven on earth sort of thing, without the struggle of the Jewish people. He deeply believed that the Jewish people and the German people directly conflict and contradict each other and butt heads continuously, and that there is a spiritual war between the Jewish people and the German people for domination. He believed that the Jewish people of the Abrahamic religions and things like that would ultimately end up destroying the world in some, fascist, in some facet of that. You could see that when it comes to the development of Zionism in the late 1800s. A lot of these ideas of developing Israel as its own national identity, as its own ethno-state, these sorts of things, these embedded into Hitler's psyche, of things that he wanted to prevent. When it came to, Jewish businesses, Jewish markets, things like that. He deeply believed that if the Jewish people were to gain some type of political or economic power within the the state as an entity, then they would be able to sway and eventually destroy, the entire world, or control the entire world, so to speak. People still believe this. I'll get into that later when I talk about Israel and modern day Israel. But back to what I was saying. With Hitler, it's this spiritual, continuous back and forth. So for him, it was the eradication of all Jewish people and all other, subhuman groups to succumb, to the almighty powers of the Aryan race, the Aryan Brotherhood. They needed to be propped up as this idealistic version of themselves, the patriarchal, male-dominated society, the women being subservient to men, idealistic art forms, the Greek and Roman art forms, where they all have these chiseled abs and they all look great, or they're, very intelligent, or, all of these sorts of attributes that would seem, very fitting, very endearing. He had believed a lot when it came to Nietzsche's Übermensch. He had believed in this sort of naturalistic or supernaturalistic man who will become his own God, so to speak, because Nietzsche had believed that God is dead. Therefore, we need to, in order to wipe the blood off of ourselves, we must become God ourselves, of our own lives, and try to dictate and control as much as we can of our own lives, to have this world sort of bend to us in some type of way. Now, it's been talked about whether or not Nietzsche would have been a fascist, whether he would have supported Hitler, whether he would have supported the barbarity of Hitler's ways, because both sides of the political spectrum have taken Nietzsche's approach and used it in very different ways. But he is still considered a proto-fascist in some regard. That the strong oppress the weak, the strong should overpower the weak, the mass rule of the weak is a problem because of hive mind, reality, and sort of things, the removing of democratic values, liberalism, capitalism, those sorts of things, and socialism. So yeah, Hitler had taken, those sort of leadership, elitist views of Friedrich Nietzsche and applied it to himself, and believing that, he was sort of destined to do these things for his, for the German people. There is a very spiritualistic aspect to Hitler's ideas, where he deeply and thoroughly believes that the Jewish blood and other blood of societies, of cultures, are fundamentally inferior to that of the Aryan Brotherhood. So whether it was the First Reich, who in his mind and a lot of German nationalist minds were the ones that destroyed the Holy Roman Empire and destroyed the 1,000-year reign of the Holy Roman Empire, even though they didn't really last 1,000 years because they were taken over continuously, and it was really only during some years of the Republic and of the early empire. But that was shown as the First Reich. And then of course the Second Reich, the early after the Franco-Prussian War, and then into after World War I, and that was the fall of the Second Reich. But these sorts of idealistic, anti-rational, anti-reason ideas that were embedded into Hitler's psyche, molded him into a monster, molded him into an obsessed, totalitarian beast. His ideas like German absolute idealism, that the perceived consciousness of the world, or the material world itself doesn't exist, and it's only perceived consciousness. There has to be some sort of, mind that is controlling these sorts of things, these sorts of thought processes, in order for anything else to exist, or maybe, it is just conjured up in the mind. So if you think differently and you apply your energy or your essence into the world around you, that the world around you can then change. I think that's one of his biggest ideas, especially, other idealists who had adopted a similar viewpoint. And with this viewpoint, you then can view yourself as, okay, well, if I get enough people, if I get enough Aryans, if I get enough, true people who all have the right consciousness, then we can all group together, we can oppress and destroy the rest, and then, the other people can reign for 1,000 years, and it will be a utopian vision on heaven, rather than, it'll be, like I said, a heaven on earth. He actively had gone against the Jewish idea, Jewish Abrahamic traditions. I think he said somewhere, I can't remember exactly where he said it, but that Jesus couldn't have been a Jew. It was not possible. He must have either been Aryan or flat out, didn't exist, and a different type of religion should take its place. It's also been hinted of whether or not he was a Gnostic follower, believing that the material world is conjured up by Satan, or some type of devil character, and that the blood the material version of the blood of Jewish people is fundamentally inferior, and they are spiritually dead. They're spiritually dead to our sins, and maybe that there's even devils that infiltrate the Jewish people's bodies and things like that, and that they infect themselves with their genes materially. So that's another one of Hitler's core beliefs. What else? Let me look within the Political Ideologies book if there's anything else I would like to say about it. Hitler and Mussolini were essentially propagandists, interested in ideas and theories largely because of their power to elicit an emotional response and spur the masses to action. Fascism thus practices the politics of the will. Second, the rejection of the Enlightenment gave fascism a predominantly negative or destructive character. Fascists, in other words, have often been clearer about what they oppose than what they support. So this will, this idealistic will, and people who follow this anti-rationalistic sort of thinking, is the will of the Aryans. So, kill all these groups, kill the inferior groups, keep the blood pure, keep the blood present within Aryan groups, even though no one can really truly be fully Aryan, and it's not even a race. But it's another thing for another time. I think I'll talk about Israel. When it comes to modern day Israel, there's been a revival of Hitler's ideas, more so now than ever, especially with the backing of the United States to Israel or other nations who had backed Israel when it came to early, 1940, 1946, 1947 colonial expansion and destruction when it came to Muslims and Palestinians within the Middle East, through the moving of Israel as a functioning national state. I think usually what hate groups despise about Israel is the ideas of Zionism when it comes to an ethno-state, and they point that like, hey, look, they're trying to develop an ethno-state. This is the beginning of, what we were talking about with the end of other races or other classes or the death of the Aryans, because, the Jews are finally going to take over. They're going to bomb all these other countries. They bombed Iran. They're trying to become a world dominating power because they believe that they're, a chosen people of the Jewish religion, and that is typically the belief is, since they're a part of the chosen people of Israel, if there's the chosen people of Israel, then they'll be favored by God, and everyone else is basically inferior, which exactly is the opposite of even within Christianity. Of course, that was then the oppression of Jewish people if they don't conform into Christianity or Christian ideology within even to the Roman era of the early beginning AD era, then of course they would then be executed. They would be ostracized, imprisoned, whatever. What else? I don't know. I think I think there's a lot of problems when it comes to that sort of line of thinking, because it's its own religion. Even if people don't want to admit that it's its own religion, it is a type of religion. It's spiritual. It's mystical. It's it's outside of logical norms. It's oppressive. It puts you versus them. It's populistic. It drives out discourse. It keeps people from actually talking or engaging with other people, because you've already determined in your mind that these people are evil, these people are vile, these people are sick. How can I, have a conversation with them? Their blood is tainted. Their blood is inferior. These sorts of things. And I think why these ideas get so puffed up is, they've been with us in our culture forever, and as human beings, we can't distinguish our own cognitive biases most of the time, and our own hate seeps out as a logical solution. When it comes to Hitler, we'll just say, oh, well, the logical thing is natural selection within, these people being better than these other people, and we'll justify it with their brain sizes, or we'll justify it with, maybe they have less neuron connections, or they're, closer together in their skull sizes, and da-da-da-da. We promote these scientific ideas to fulfill our own biases and our own preconceived notions of, superiority or inferiority. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is believing a specific group is inferior than another group, or believing that another group is superior than another group. And it keeps us separated, it keeps us small, it keeps us from communicating or talking with other people. It promotes more stereotypes, and then ultimately you get what you wanted. Certain groups get more attention, other groups get left and ostracized, and then you created the exact outcome that you had believed in your mind to be true. Now the result is true because you created it. When it comes to other systems like maybe slavery, or it comes to Jim Crow laws, that is, I know people hate this, when it comes to critical race theory, that is the idea. We had laws built into the system to systematically oppress black people and other peoples of color, minority groups, in order for them to not have as much of a chance, because white people, white colonialists, white slave owners, Europeans, had deeply believed that they had more intelligence, more sophistication, more education, more opportunities, things like that. And of course, then it shows as, well, okay, you're not giving black housing funding, you're not giving black education funding, you're not providing the same opportunities to black people as you are to white people, and then, well, that shows then the increase of gang violence, that then shows for the increase of mass incarcerations per capita, that then shows, shootings, when it comes to, when some Republicans talk about black on black crime. Those are representative of our failing system, not of the race, or the creed, or the religion, or the sexual orientation itself, but of the system. That's what it is. It's that of the system. Because the problem is never actually addressed. The problem is never actually shown. So when it comes to Nazi Germany, you don't show the actual problem when you say that Jewish corporations or Jewish businesses are what is taking over the world and da-da-da-da-da. No, it was that oppression of other Christians or Muslims or Babylonians or Assyrians or any other hate group that systematically oppressed Jewish people to get them out of the Middle East, to then have them move to feudal era European societies, where they then became bankers, they became lawyers, because those were the only jobs that they could actually have, and became somewhat of a protected class when it came against Christians and Muslims and other groups. Then you have, even within because then of the destruction of 6 million Jews, then establish Israel as its own nation, as its own state, which should happen. But then, of course, Zionism shouldn't happen. Ethnocentrism and ethno-state should not happen, because then you are creating the exact same problem. This is a cycle. The same things keep happening. The spiritual, idealistic value that some people are just better than other people, and then dog eat dog. It keeps happening. It continuously happens. That is Nazism. Nazism is based off of race. It's based off of blood. It's based off of class. It's based off of oppression. It's the same foundations basically as fascism, of a totalitarian state of full control. This is what the people want, even though they don't want this, or maybe they do want this, and they just don't realize it, or they don't know what's best for them, and they need a leader to promote this. They need militarism, they need imperialization, they need all these things. Yeah. So, sorry, that I know I always rant like every video. So it's probably not even going to be a very coherent video. I hope you followed me with my rant. I just start videoing and then I rant. I have no clear direction of where it's going. I don't write a script. I don't write anything. I don't edit. So, in summary, in conclusion, Nazism, Adolf Hitler, natural selection, struggle, innate struggle between other races, between other classes, a spiritual battle between Jewish people and the Aryan people, the promoting of consciousness, idealistic values, molding your own ideas as a reality, as a state, as a totalitarian dictatorship. Mussolini said that fascism is totalitarianism. You can clearly see that with Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler's Nazism comes to his belief that Jesus couldn't have been Jewish, that the material realm is innately evil, and you must think spiritually. You must think within your mind, or outside of your mind, as a greater force, as a unification, which then comes as the Aryan Brotherhood. Physically, Jewish people can look fine, they'll be okay, but it's the blood that coursed through the material that's in their spiritual. They're then spiritually dead. But yeah, I don't know if I covered everything. I probably didn't cover everything. I would have to do way more deep dives, and I would have to do even more research, things like that. So I hope we covered up. It's very brief. These ideas go back thousands and thousands of years. A lot to cover in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So, okay. Hope you guys have a good day. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all those things. Yeah. Peace. Catch you in the next one.